hopefully this will be actually an energizing conversation. That's the whole point of this whole week, and I think specifically today. First of all, let's give ourselves a big round of applause because we've gone through a week of advocacy, meetings, and sharing your stories, and honestly connecting. And I think it's been a beautiful thing. I've seen some amazing connections happen, and yeah, it's not easy. So we're almost done, and I have the honor and the privilege to introduce a panel, and just to also set the scene a little bit. And this is also based off of the Latino Climate Justice Framework that we just heard about. So according, and this is, I'm gonna get a little scientific, but this is also information you can find in our LCJF. But as we all know, there's tons of recent reports, including from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and scientists and researchers from across the world all sounding the alarm that our future is in jeopardy, and we are not doing nearly enough to prevent the globe from warming to very dangerous levels within our lifetimes. This is something a lot of us are experiencing. I heard this a lot in the meetings that I was a part of, and we are just dealing with a climate catastrophe. So as increases in global temperatures are triggering the passage of difficult to reverse thresholds, causing increases in high intensity hurricanes. Obviously right now we have on our hearts and minds Florida specifically, and the back-to-back hurricanes that are happening there. Yeah, I know that there have been folks here that have been affected, and just appreciate you being here, and it's just, it puts it into real terms, and it's pretty emotional actually. And so we also know that Latino communities and other communities of color are already experiencing some of the worst impacts of this environmental devastation. With a consequential election on the horizon, it is a pivotal time for Latino communities to demonstrate what's most important to us and keeping our familias safe. So today our conversation will focus on what is driving the climate crisis, how it is affecting our communities, how we can adapt to it, and why the Latino community is important to this election, and what we can do to limit further warming and provide our children with a better future. And it's really exciting because a lot of these topics that we are going to be talking about, that our panelists will be representing, are all priorities that are found in the LCJF, that they're really just doing the work on the ground. So first, I have the privilege of introducing Tekoah Abdul Kadara, Executive Director of Allensworth Community Development Corporation. Yeah, welcome to the program. And I am going to read a little bit of the bio. Carrying on the legacy work of his grandmother, Nettie Morrison, the unofficial mayor of Allensworth, and his mother, Denise Kadara, Tekoah's educational background in business, administration and management, professional experience in sales, and lived experience as an Allensworth resident and community leader positioned him well to lead project and partnership development for the Allensworth Progressive Association and the community of Allensworth. Thank you for coming. And then our next panelist, Sebastian Baez, Just Transition Coordinator for UPROSE, if you can come up. Sebastian is a third-generation New Yorker of Ecuadorian, Cuban, and Dominican descent. Growing up in Astoria, he learned firsthand about the importance of energy generation, accessible transportation, and working-class labor that structure the built and natural environments he lives in. Thank you, Sebastian. And then our last but not least speaker is Yaheiry Mora, Environmental Justice Action's Political Director. Thank you, Yaheiry. As an activist and advocate, Yaheiry brings over a decade of experience grounding in the labor and immigrant rights movement and Earthjustice Action. As the founding director of Gaza in Action, the largest immigrant rights organization in the Mid-Atlantic region, she built Gaza in Action's electioneering and PAC infrastructure from the ground up while leading the organization's electoral expansion from 1 to 3 states. And now she serves as the political director for Earthjustice Action. Thank you guys for being here. Estabas en otra página, por eso. Okay, Paula Reyes, Community Engagement Manager for LA Compost, has spent the past 4 years connecting with diverse communities through a decentralized network of compost sites in Los Angeles County. She led the first ever soil farmer program in South Central LA and Watts, supporting individuals and families during COVID emergency and infrastructure to grow food at home, soil testing, urban farming education, and access to safe local compost. Woo! Okay. Okay, now we're complete. Okay, so just to get us kicked off, I wanted to start first with you, Tekoah. So as your community's work is one of the powerful case studies that we featured in the Latino Climate Justice Framework. It's on page 35, by the way. And you represent a community that is true example of how environmental racist practice like redlining in a community primarily made up of families of color pushed the community out and left out those that were, still doing incredible, or that were the recipients of a lot of environmental injustices. So can you tell us a little bit more about the community of Allensworth in California, some of its history and what that community has endured over the last century, and what kind of risks are these community under, what solutions are bringing strength and resilience back into the community?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. Talk a little bit about Allensworth. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. All right, to talk a little bit about Allensworth. It's 10 minutes from Delano, the birthplace of the farm workers movement. Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, I've had the pleasure of meeting Dolores Huerta on numerous occasions. She's an amazing woman in her 90s. But Allensworth is also got its name from a runaway slave, escaped to the Union Army, worked his way to the highest rank at the time of any black official in the military, and founded a town in Central California to escape Jim Crow. He built his town on education. He worked with Booker T. Washington to establish, Allensworth is actually Tuskegee University West Coast. So I heard of Tuskegee University in Alabama, this is supposed to be the West Coast version. So the community was built around education, it was built around industry, self-sustainability, and the desire to escape what was happening in the Deep South. A place where black people could reside and be safe, right? But prior to that, Allensworth is the shoreline of the largest lake west of the Mississippi River. It spanned over 900 square miles. It was the birthplace of the Yokuts tribe. There's many Yokut tribes. So just a little historical background on Allensworth and the land. Allensworth, like you said, has gone through a ton of just injustices. We know what happened with the indigenous people. Allensworth has always had water issues in the Central Valley because it was a lake bed, and arsenic and things like that were always in that lake bed. They got worse as agriculture and colonization came in and started pumping water and drained the largest lake west of Mississippi in less than 30 years, right? So, which has also created some of the worst air pollution in the country. So, to speak to some of the systematic injustices, that's what we're dealing with right now. It's an agricultural hub of the country and much of the world. Now it's more of the agricultural hub of exploitation and just overuse. But we have some solutions, so we've been working on some really positive things to remediate some of these things. So I don't know if that's mine. You want me to talk about those now? All right. First of all, we've brought in a training program, the Beginning Farmer Training Program. We were funded $500,000 through CDFA to teach people how to grow soil, you know, because that's the key. Mother Nature and our people never use fertilizers, they never use pesticides, they never use herbicides. This is something that the colonizer brought in, right? Mother Nature doesn't even use to grow the forest, so we want to teach people how to grow soil. And from growing the soil, teach people how to grow healthy food. With that, we have an agrivoltaics. I'm not sure if you've heard of agrivoltaics, but it's the combination of solar and growing crops or raising animals. When we're talking about the farm workers, you know, you have an opportunity now to grow healthy food. Farm workers now have shade while they're working, while they're harvesting and doing these different things. And you're also generating power. So for sustainability, again, we want to be a sustainable community. So that's another thing. Brain is skipping a beat.
No, that's good. Thank you.
But yeah, I don't want to talk.
Yeah, we can pass it on too.
Yes.
So now across the country and the community you represent, Sebastian, if we can pass it over to you, of Sunset Park in Brooklyn, New York. Also another case study that we feature in the updated LCJF on page 12. You are definitely no stranger to the impacts of the climate crisis in this community. Can you tell us a little bit about Sunset Park and what y'all endured during and in the aftermath of Hurricane Superstorm Sandy in 2012? Yeah, if you can go ahead.
Yeah, first I want to give a thank you to the GreenLatinos team for convening us. I think it's great that we have Latina advocates and organizations on the front lines of the climate crisis from across the nation here today. So I want to give a big thank you to that. As for the question, a little bit about the history of Sunset Park. First, Brooklyn, New York City, home of the Lenape-Hoking people, or the Lenape people who called it Lenape-Hoking. That history is still important to Brooklyn. But really in flash forwarding to the 1800s, Brooklyn is a center of industry, not just in New York City, but of the country and the world. And so in the late 1800s, Sunset Park, as much of Brooklyn occurs, industrializes. And so you have huge factories, a lot of industry, a lot of manufacturing in this industrial waterfront community overlooking the harbor. And so, you know, in the first half of the 1900s, bustling with manufacturing jobs, as much of the country is also bustling with manufacturing jobs. But come the second half of the 19th century, with deindustrialization, a lot of maritime activity moves across the harbor to New Jersey, to other parts of the country, to other parts of the world. And really that's when a lot of the Latina population in Sunset Park actually moves in. Sunset Park is long home to Puerto Rican immigrants who migrated in the 60s and 70s. So right as industry was falling apart and deindustrializing, Puerto Ricans, other populations like Chinese people were moving in. And so that history shapes the present condition of the neighborhood. It's about a third Latina, about a third Chinese, and about a third white, with populations from the Middle East, such as Yemen, such as Palestine. And so Sunset Park has historically been a working class neighborhood. It continues to be a working class neighborhood. But that legacy of deindustrialization, of abandonment of those industrial lands means that a lot of the industrial waterfront is abandoned. These are brownfields, which are sites with toxic pollution. And really, when Hurricane Sandy came along and inundated much of the waterfront, it wasn't the first call to action, but it really was a wake-up call for a lot of Sunset Park residents. UPROSE, the organization I work at, has been in the community since 1966. We're Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization. And really in the late 1990s, when a lot of this exposure to toxic pollution started being a priority for the community, UPROSE helped support that. Now, with Superstorm Sandy, it was a wake-up call for a lot of the region, but really in Sunset Park, it hits home because we're home to at least 3 polluting peaker plants. Now, these are power plants that are really old, that they come on during times of peak demand. So in New York City, where we have seasons, our summer season is really hot, and when you turn on your AC and the demand can't be met by traditional sources, that's when the power plants in our communities, which are disproportionately working class, Black and brown, Latino, are subject to all that air pollution. And so, with a storm like Sandy, which wasn't even a Category 4, wasn't even a Category 5 storm, it was a relatively smaller storm by comparison, and still it caused so much damage across the region. UPROSE recognize that we don't just need to continue fighting these power plants as we have for more than 10 years. We also need to build out an alternative. And so out of that, Sunset Park Solar is actually born, and it's New York City's first community-owned solar initiative. Now, and so, I can talk a little bit about that now or later? Later? Okay. Sunset Park Solar, which we will cue into later.
Okay, thank you. And now, Yaheiry, I would love to dig a little bit into your specific experience and speaking about the Latino community and the moment that we're in right now with the election. Why is the Latino community so critical as a voter segment? And why do Latinos why Latinos do and should care about climate change and what's at stake in this election?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to echo my Caribbean brother's statement on just congratulating everyone and how beautiful it is to see so many Latinos in this space. I'll say that I'm new to this space, so I am learning and I'm getting to know more folks, and it's certainly very encouraging to see all these diverse faces in the room. And to your question, so I'm going to tell you a few things that you probably know. Latinos are, right, we are one of the fastest growing segments of the electorate. Just from 2016 to 2020, the voter as a voting bloc, we grew from 27 million to 36 million, right? So all of this means that our voices really matter. And they not only matter because of the sheer number of Latinos that every year are becoming eligible to vote, but because particularly in consequential elections, as 2024 is, and we all consider it to be, the path to 270, the path to victory, has to include a Latino strategy, because we are in big numbers in those swing states, right? In Arizona, and I make sure I type this so I don't mess it up, but in Arizona, Latinos are 24% of the vote. Nevada, 19%. In Pennsylvania, we are 5%. But in thinking about that percentage, you also have to think about just the slim margin of victory in those states. So, and I'll combine what I'll say next with why should we care, right? Like, we're talking, my brother here is talking about like Puerto Ricans in New York City. I used to live in New York City, I moved here, and I did some work in Pennsylvania. And I remember doing a lot of work in Pennsylvania after Hurricane Maria, right? Because you had a lot of Puerto Ricans who were climate refugees. Our communities, as we know, are most impacted and vulnerable to environmental impacts. And with that said, now in Pennsylvania, Allentown, York, Lancaster, Reading, Latinos represent from 38 to 69% of the vote. Reading, PA, my Caribbean, Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, many of whom cannot afford New York City. Sorry, it's not about you, but we know that. How is something have moved? And in a state that decided the 2016 election by less than a point, and that decided the 2020 election by 1.17%, 5% of the vote that Latinos represent, like, that it is a big deal, right? Like, our voice really matters, and we can definitely decide who is going to be the next president of our country. I also want to say that, as we know, building political power for our community matters, because it is the only way that we can really advance the issues that we care most about, right? The outcome of this election really will determine whether hard-fought progress might be reversed, or we will continue to actually push for progress from where we are. And I'll just add as an end that it's not only about climate, right? It's not only about climate change. I come from the labor and immigrant rights, and I believe, and I know we all do, in the intersection. I know that Latinos care about the economy, right? And that's why we must talk about, right? Like, obviously, public utility commission, like rising utility costs, right? Those are kitchen table issues that I think are part of environmental justice, and just the lens that we must continue to really push this message, I think, of voting and engagement, and why it matters in our communities.
Yeah.
Okay. So Paola, I would love for you to, I would love to dig into, tell us a little bit about LA Compost, tell us about some of the problems that y'all are trying to fix and address through the community projects there, and tell us about the community that you're in.
Hola, buenas tardes ya, no sé. Eso pluma me norteó. Well, we're gonna go from waters to worms and composting and nematodes, and the joy of putting just your hands on the soil and how much value that has for the health of our community. And in Los Angeles, 1 in 4 families are food insecure, so how is compost helping, or how are we supporting our community with like something that it looks so innocent in a way? We're not inventing composting. Composting has been here forever. In so many cases I go to communities and people tell me, oh, I make a hole in my patio and I put the food scraps there. Is that compost? And I'm like, yes, you can call it whatever you want. So, oh, I remember this. My abuelita, my tia used to do this in Mexico. I just don't have space to do it again. So with a decentralized network of community compost sites, we provide access to compost education, soil health, testing, remediation, and just, again, the joy of connecting with other neighbors. I just want to share briefly a story that it really impacted me 2 years ago during the pandemic, when we were working in the Soul Farmer program. We were supporting families with pots, hoses, materials to grow food at home, because we were just inside our houses. We couldn't go, like, for those that we live in really saturated areas with lack of green spaces, having a potted plant with some herbs to make tea, it just brings so much relief of the stress of all the hardships that we experience as a community. But one of these stories is like a community member that lived in a multi-housing property, and the landlord basically cut the water from the patio and put rocks in the possible areas where they could plant something. And that for me is like, we're facing systematic oppression, we're facing lack of green spaces, and at the same time there's a lot of roughness and lack of tenderness in this landlord super violent culture that I started observing in South Central LA and that was a recurrent thing. Landlords just couldn't access to what is really important to Latinos, which is being close to earth. I was talking to Brian earlier today that our community faced different migrations, right? I'm from Mexico, from Zapopan, Mexico, that is here, another Zapopanos. But my family immigrated from Zacatecas, really countryside, to the city, and that was in itself a really violent change. And then coming from the city to the United States and facing another kind of ¿cómo se puede decir? Como un desalojo de la conexión con la tierra. People are really looking to connect to green spaces. And another thing that we don't talk a lot about is about the relation with mental health. I think the question that you brought up is like the impacts of this is, I hear many times around the compost pile, people that keep coming not only for the fresh compost that they can access, but because these spaces provide a place to relax and just being like, just forget about all the problems that we live in Los Angeles. And I think that in itself is a value. We don't manage those gardens. We can take the credit that Jose Miguel here or Rene, they put a lot of effort in growing food. We just add an asset that is composting, because again, like Tekoah said, we don't have to use fertilizers, and we don't have to go to Home Depot to buy our plants and to buy our soil. I found that super sad. We can provide soil and plants that grow in our community and just share the resources. So that's kind of like the soul of LA Compost, connecting people to each other and connecting our roots to the soil, which that's where we come from the ocean and from the resources. So we are organisms that are really similar to the compost pile. You see a compost pile and it's the same thing that is happening in your gut. So we are connected and we need to reclaim those spaces to do composting.
Not this time, but coming soon maybe. Let's talk. Okay, and now going back to Tekoah. Yeah, I'd love to dig in a little bit more just specifically into the unique challenges of rural living, and we all know that extreme heat waves are increasing more and more. We had a very extreme heat season over this past summer, and it's affecting everything. Obviously, huge water scarcity issues and drought issues. And what I'm really interested in, and I think a lot of people here would be interested in, is what is happening in Allensworth, and y'all turning a crisis into solutions and power and continuing to fight can be a model for other communities experiencing similar issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Allensworth, again, I didn't say it earlier, but it was an all-black town at one time. Now it's 97% Latino. So us working together is huge. Allensworth has had issues, like I said earlier, with water. And we are working together to bring in different types of technologies. I mentioned agrivoltaics, and that will help with some of the farm workers. But as around water, we have large amounts of arsenic in our water, 300 parts per billion. The state maximum is 10, right? So I shared yesterday, some of the kids in the community have silver teeth because water is so expensive, and these kids are surviving on juice and soda. Right? So we're working with Dr. Gaggill at UC Berkeley, and Dr. Gaggill's technology is able to remove 300 parts per billion down to below 3 parts per billion of arsenic. So we're looking at bringing that technology in. It's very little waste at the end, sludge or whatever that typically is involved with reverse osmosis and things of that nature. So it's really efficient, and we work beautifully in our community. We're working on an IP intellectual property for this technology, so we can set up water kiosks in our area and other parts of the region, because it's the lake bed, which a lot of our communities are affected by arsenic. So with that being said, this is a great way to fix or alleviate like our most basic issue is not being able to drink water and having to have bottled water brought in. In Allensworth, we also have really old infrastructure around water. We had massive flooding just last March, and emergency services vehicles coming into town, bringing in sandbags for the community to protect their homes. They broke our underground piping, right? So water goes off. So now we're reliant on bottled water to take showers, or the 5-gallon jugs to take showers and clean ourselves. You have residents that work in the fields with all these pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. They can't come home and hug their children, before they clean themselves, and sometimes we don't have water. So this type of technology, along with agrivoltaics and things of that nature, will stop the power shortages that sometimes triggers our water to go off. And then at the same time, we'll be able to have water. Just have water to clean ourselves and drink, you know, so hope that answers some of the question. But yeah, those are some of the things we're dealing with in Allensworth. Those are some of the solutions that we're coming up with to help combat and be sustainable.
Yeah, and Sebastian, kind of a similar question, but would love for you to dig in a little bit more into the first community solar project in your area and how other communities can learn from it and replicate it.
Yeah, so like I was saying a little bit, Sunset Park is home to peaker plants, and these are old polluting power plants that are really costly. They cost us in terms of our pocketbooks because the electricity is expensive. They cost us in terms of our public health because they emit a lot of air pollutants. And of course, they run on gas and oil, so they cost the planet in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And so what UPROSE does in service of a just transition from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy is actually transform the way we actually control our resources. So rather than a developer controlling our resources like energy, we're fighting for community control of land, water, energy, that sort of stuff. And so community-owned solar, it's not just renewable energy, it's also control over that renewable energy and how those resources are used. So not only do subscribers to community solar projects get 20% off their electricity bills, workers from Sunset Park are actually trained on solar technologies to be part of that clean energy economy. So making sure that the benefits of that development are actually local and in the hands of residents. And in addition to this, because the solar array is co-owned by UPROSE, the revenues from selling that electricity into the grid, they don't go off to some foreign developer or some extractive company, but rather they're invested in a fund that the subscribers actually govern. So, for this solar project, it's about 725 kilowatts, which translates into about 170 subscribers. This is going to generate about over $1 million in money, funds, that can be invested into infrastructure projects of the community's choosing. This can be additional community solar projects. This can be other infrastructure projects like rain gardens, like composting, like access to clean water, and really a powerful way of reclaiming control over our energy and being able to make those investments into our communities. Again, moving away from that extractive economy where we have polluting fossil fuel plants and actually empowering our community with control over our energy.
Thank you. And Yaheiry, I think it would be really great to hear a little bit. Obviously, Earthjustice, we know, is a legal organization, legal and regulatory organization. We partner with them a lot. And I would just love to know what are some of the fights that y'all are focusing in on right now to ensure that the voices of our community are being heard and that we are being protected, as how can we also as advocates and community members support some of the efforts that are coming out of the fight.
Yes, and as you very well mentioned, Earthjustice is a bunch of environmental attorneys. But we also have a lobbying team. So there are a lot, I think we have our hands on a lot of these issues on both sides, litigation and advocacy. I'll share that, similar in Florida, on both advocacy and litigation, that folks are, the organization is doing work to make sure that there are lower utility rates and that they, to lower the cost of the utility rates by making sure that they come from renewable sources and that the cost is in part with the cost of the fossil fuel cost. Also, that there's advocacy around laws that govern toxics. That's important, right? Given that many folks in our community work in construction, agriculture, And, I think I also love that the organization have used in the past environmental laws to stop the private detention centers from being built. I think coming in and just learning just the breadth, I think, of the work has been great. I'll say also someone new to the organization that I am very proud to see that Earthjustice, when it comes to the work for the Latino community, does not consider that body of work a project or a segmentation of the work. It is core to the work that the organization does and really ingrained in the mission. That's why I said that it really covers and touches it all. Currently, I am working with our C4 organization, Earthjustice Action, and electorally, right now our focus is elevating the role of courts and judges as an environmental issue. Because so many people are going to the polls with one race in mind, the top of the ticket. So much, it's very important, we all know that, but there are also many states across the country, I think this year's 33, where voters will be electing their state Supreme Court. And in an era where we see so many like rollbacks of victories, think at the nationally in the U.S. Supreme Court, we have to remember that these state courts see 95% of all cases. They have so much power over everything that we care about, right? From, again, like democracy, like civil rights issues, reproductive justice, and also environmental justice, right? There's a lot of like litigation that happens, and it's really one of the tools, I think, in our toolbox that we have to fight back, I think, against polluting industries and other interests. And I think, right now, bringing awareness to all voters, especially communities of color, around the role that courts and judges play in environmental justice is one of the things that we're working on actively.
It's like blinking, I don't know what that means. Okay, Paola, yes. So going back to LA Compost, so you described this a little bit, but y'all have built strong relationships with local urban farms and schools and grassroots organizations helping to regenerate soil and improve local agriculture. And given that many of the communities you work with face food inequality or inequity and environmental racism, how do you envision scaling these initiatives to expand their impact?
Yeah, right now, and thank you for the GreenLatinos, we're recipients of the award for this year, is that we're trying to expand our farmers market program. When in California, the SB 1384, I got it right? 3, thank you, was passed. Now cities are enforced to have a collection of food waste in your curbside, but guess who was left behind, right? People living in multi-family housing that don't have access to a green bin, and therefore they're behind. I mean, they're left out of this policy. Where are these people composting? They're not like, they're not valued enough to be dignified with this access to composting. So that, I think, this is where LA Compost and other medium-scale profits or non-profits compost service can come into place to provide access for those folks via the farmers market program, for example, where you can go and buy your fresh food and then drop off your food waste for the last week. I think New York has a really successful project like that too. So we're trying to expand that. We're trying to expand also our presence in park hubs. We need to demystify the idea that compost needs to happen miles away from our cities where no one sees us and where the impacted people are also people that look like us, and they're breeding all the emissions from these big industrial composting facilities, which we are not opposed to industrial composting. We just don't think that it's the main solution for the huge problem that we have with food waste. And also by providing access to community compost inside of our hubs, we are actually providing classrooms for kids, seniors, and adults to learn more about biology, soil remediation, and just bring soil to the agenda, because as we were mentioned earlier today, there's agencies in our federal and state level that protect water, that protect air, but barely no one is talking about our soil. And it's left to the agriculture people, and then we face like illness because we're eating food that is just basically poison. So I feel locating compost inside public spaces is where we all can learn together and just demystify this idea that I'm gonna put, I mean, how many of us is like, I'm just gonna put this in the trash and it's gonna go away. There's no go away. And away has an address, and away has a last name, and that away is gonna be impacted by that idea that everything disappears. So that's what we're trying to do, and we also try to be part of a more like collaborative like network. It's not only us. I mean, we try to be part of the the U.S. Compost Council, Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I really invite you to check out these organizations, and if you have community composters in your community, just get close to them, go and tour your sites, get excited, put your hands in the soil, and learn about the nematodes, the parasites, the bacteria, the bad bacteria, and you're gonna be fascinated about everything that just they don't teach us, and they're trying to disconnect us from, to just, I mean, it's another way to suppress or control about how we eat and what we want to consume. So support your local composters for sure.
Thank you, I love that. And I recently, just a quick personal anecdote, I started composting this past year. I have my own little bin thing. And I have to say, it brings me so much joy to see like all the bugs. There's so many bugs that go through it, and then when you actually use the soil, it's like really fun to see the plant thrive. So I think now I'm gonna go into, well, we're almost wrapping up, but I wanted to ask a little bit about some of what Yaheiry kind of teed up for us, but obviously there's a lot at stake right now. There's a possible administration change. I would love to hear from each of you what your thoughts on are. How would it endanger the work that is being discussed today? And what would be your top environmental or EJ priorities that you would urge the next president to prioritize in their first 100 days? And this is kind of a riff off of, we just released a first 100 days document, which we have some copies outside, but would love to hear from you all on, just kind of what would be ideal for you. Yeah, anyone can answer.
I keep speaking about solar and agrivoltaics. I don't necessarily like the idea of just solar on its own, because that land gets scraped, the animals there get wiped out. But agrivoltaics, you can grow food, you can grow an ecosystem, and you can still generate power. Moving away from fossil fuels and all of these other things. I was just at a solar conference in Chicago about a month ago. And if you just use 1% of America's farmland, you can power the country with solar. Wow. What are we doing? Using all these other means for power and energy, if it can be that simple. So for me, it would just be moving in that direction. Just moving in that direction at a more aggressive rate, I guess, and leaving fossil fuels behind. It's important, and there's ways to do this without hurting the environment, without hurting the ecosystem, without damaging pathways that animals naturally travel, and taking care of ourselves. So for me, it would be simple, just changing how we do power.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else want to take this up?
Good switch. I can also, on a similar note, we would say prioritizing community-owned solar in the first 100 days. There's been a lot of recent federal legislation, like the IJA, the IIJA, or the IRA, the IIJA, a lot of alphabet soup of legislation. Some of that money has been allocated, some of it hasn't been. But really, a lot of the work that is needed for community-owned solar, especially in cities where people who rent, they don't own their buildings, whether they're residential tenants or small businesses. There's a lot of roof space. There's a lot of roof space. If you've ever flown into New York City, you can see just how big it is. Maybe you can't see Sunset Park, but you see the potential of community-owned solar. And so really being able to access and unlock even more funding for that, I think is really important, because we often think of solar and renewable energy as these big utility scale projects in the countryside, not really connected to cities, but the solutions and the actual vision, it's on our rooftops, it's in our neighborhoods. And it really just requires a lot of funding that EJ communities, Latino organizations and advocates have been fighting for decades. And it's time to use that money and continue to fund that vision.
Sure. We were trying to change the order, but that didn't work. We're purists. Let's keep it the way it is. So yes, and obviously there are two potential outcomes here. I think that in the case of a change in administration, definitely there are a lot of risks, a lot of the things in danger, pullback in investments for renewable sources, changes in worker health standards, and so many other things that we will be working on. And if there's no change in administration, I understand there's an environmental justice executive order that I think that will be priority to have, to push forward.
Well, it's more a reflection. Like I don't come from a policy background, but I'm just thinking in an era of like false solutions for the climate crisis, where we're talking about removing carbon from, I don't know, like crazy technology that sometimes I don't understand. And I think if you can't explain something to a 3-year-old or 2-year-old abuelita, it's like not real. So in an era of like false ideas to solve this crisis, I feel any policy that can just like support community green spaces. But I was really excited this morning to hear that the USDA is saying that they're gonna change their policy, not to call it like tree planting initiative, but tree maintenance and planting initiative, because I think we have done a lot about the same, planting, building, opening gardens, cutting ribbons, but after 3 years, those projects are abandoned. So I just want to see policy that support projects in the long term, that support like small organizations that have contact to elevate these places, pay people what they deserve to do the work that they do in community gardens and doing composting and all these amazing works. But yes, definitely we need climate resiliency. It's not in like symposiums, it's not in like apps, it's in the community gardens where people are organizing. I come from Oaxaca, California. I see the Oaxacan community organizing themselves in parties, in dances, but when the emergency comes, they're like fast to act because they found so much joy in the way they meet and they unite that I've been learning so much from them. So I feel we need green spaces to find each other, to turn the piles, but also talk about democracy, reproductive rights, kids' rights, right? And no one talk about that. So policy that support green spaces in the long term. Yeah.
Thank you. And so as you all probably know, this week we've been here in DC coming together to urge our elected leaders to take action at the federal, local, state level to mitigate the climate crisis. And as we continue advocating for protective policy solutions, I'd love to hear from whoever wants to answer what we can do to best hold one another accountable. So I think one challenge that I'm thinking about is we all came and spoke to all these offices, like, but what happens after that, right? And how do we hold them accountable? How do we hold ourselves accountable? And also, of course, tying it to the Latino Climate Justice Framework that you all heard about today, how can we use it to play a role or as a potential tool, in the coming months?
I'm gonna choose the word. But I'm really excited to just go back to LA and connect with Amanda and Jonathan. I think I'm really excited and grateful for GreenLatinos to extend our chapters with a presence in Los Angeles. So you guys are great teachers. I joined you on a summit 8 years ago, and I still carry things that I learned from that summit in Monterey. So I feel a lot of the knowledge is gonna sink in a couple of weeks, but definitely super happy to connect with Amanda, with Jonathan. I have an appointment on October 23rd to support Rene at something that his community is fighting for. So I feel, going back to what Rosa said, is just see each other in the room, having a great time, enjoying our company. It's definitely a reminder that accountability is in the action. It's not only a word. So thank you, Latinos, for bringing a chapter closer to us, so that's going to be the way.
Well, I am an organizer, and I believe in accountability. I think that we do this work because we wanna win, right? Like, we wanna see solutions, and I also believe that starts at the ballot box, because that's how we build political power. And as we talk about what's at stake, how much the Latino community, is growing, we also have to increase our influence, and that does not happen until we turn out. We can have the biggest vote share, but if turnout does not reflect that, right? Like, we're not exercising our power. And as an organizer, as an electoral strategist, I can also tell you that folks in battleground states particularly are getting inundated with digital ads, with phones, people with text. People are not picking up, right? Like, spending millions and millions of dollars, and there's so much investment. And the best way to turn out is when our voters hear from their friends and family. They have we all have the Maria's phone, right? Like, she's gonna pick up when we call. And so I truly believe in self-organizing, in organizing our circles and our networks, in using that to share information, what's at stake. Like, there's some states that have same-day voter registration, and we all know, as we talk about challenges, that many folks, as they get displaced, right, like, they might not have updated, or housing becomes too expensive, they might not have updated their voter registration, they might not know when they vote next. And I'll also tell you, as an immigrant, I also missed one of the most important elections of my lifetime, like Obama's election, because I had no idea that you had to register to vote. Because back home, in little DR, we don't do that. So, I think that I believe in, like, we have the most impact. We are the best trusted voices, right, for folks in our community, and we must come together to, right, like think how we exercise that, particularly in an era of a lot of misinformation, targeting specifically Latinos. I believe that it starts there. We build political power, and that positions us to actually do accountability better, because then I can unseat you if you do not deliver on those promises. That's where I come from.
We'll do reverse order this time. I would say something about holding each other accountable is that we have a framework to do this. we are all little pieces, smaller projects in the landscape of different organizations, different advocates, fighting for justice in our environment. And so being able to recognize that, whether it's Allensworth, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's Sunset Park, we're all doing this together, and we're doing different pieces, different projects, but a similar playbook. And being able to say, hey, just in my state or my borough, we're doing this, but across the country, this is the action that we're taking, and we got friends in places, we got allies across the country. So being able to say, yeah, there's a framework that unites us, and we're fighting this together.
Got tired of being first. But yeah, to echo what you just said, it's, first of all, I'm brand new to advocacy. This is my first time being in DC to do this kind of work. So to be able to take this back to my community and to my region is powerful for us, So thank you for having me again. And then, being the only Black guy in the room, for the week, it was challenging for me. But I feel so warm, and I feel so welcome, and thank you guys for having me, because this work it needs to be done with us together, because when you lift one of us up, you lift all of us up, So, I just think it's really powerful work that we're doing here, and, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I got that last night late when we were out dancing for GL Live, but I think, allies. We have the Black community, the Latino community has a lot of similarities, and I think there is a lot of power in allyship like that. And I'll also say, the Latino Climate Justice Framework, this was born out of other ideas, and actually, the Black Hive came out with a framework, and we were very inspired by that. So that's just saying that, and we worked with them closely in the first iteration, and so we're in this fight together, and like you said, when we lift our community up, we lift all communities up, and so, yeah, I love what you said. You're very welcome, always, to GreenLatinos. Okay, so this is our last question, rapid fire, but would love to hear, just to kind of end, on a hopeful note, I think that there's a lot of fear, I do hear a lot of fear from my younger family members, my nieces and nephews about the future. And because I work in the space, they come and they ask me how I do it. And sometimes I struggle, and I find that it's a day-to-day thing for me. I can feel differently from day to day, but I would love to hear from you all. What gives you hope for the future? And why should our community hold on to hope, specifically communities that have been on the front line that have experienced the worst of environmental justice? And feel free to tie it to whatever personal story you want to.
I think I can just notice the difference when I'm really struggling. This job can be stressful, and we deal with a lot of environmental injustice, but also social, economic injustice in our community. But I can just feel my body enter a community garden. I have a favorite one actually, Carver Middle School garden, and being under those olive trees and being surrounded by community, sharing food, and just talking around the compost pile. I just don't think about this crisis as something that is stressful and is big, and I just feel the shade of a tree and in company with community is just where we need to be in order to navigate this. And that's what brings me hope. Every time I can see my body just relaxing. Doesn't have to be something special. So yeah, intentional urban green spaces and people learning. Just lastly, I know my community members know what to name at least 3 farms in their community, and at least 3 gardens, and at least 3 farmers markets. I didn't see them doing this 4 or 5 years ago because this was not accessible to them. And now when we talk about the neighborhood, we guide ourselves through the, oh yeah, it's the garden in 14th Street and McKinley Avenue. Now it's not the McDonald's in this corner or the Smart and Final. Now we're basing our imaginary around these green spaces, and that brings me hope.
Before I answer, I want to offer that there, in the Latino community, you also have Afro-Latinos. So there is more that connect us, I would say, in the struggle. And you know, what gives me hope, there are a few things. I believe that increasingly Latinos are taking more action, are voting more, and are also prioritizing, I think, the climate crisis more. Like every time we see that, and that thanks to the work of like folks as you guys, right? Like those in the room. I mean, right? Like just knowing that there are folks doing this at so many levels and in so many areas is just very powerful. I also think that I remember when I was working for an immigrant rights organization, and it was 2016, and I was in Pennsylvania, and I was crying, and I felt hopeless. And I was crying because I saw in front of me immigrant members from various mixed status, and I had no idea what I was going to tell them or what it was going to look like. But quickly I realized after that we got to action. We got to action. We mobilized. We started to see victories at the state level. Maybe we had some roadblocks federally, but we started moving, I think, as a movement. You know, on the defense, but also to bring change and you know, through state legislature and local governments. So I think that gives me hope, whatever the outcome of this year will be.
I mean, what gives myself hope is that we're building infrastructure. We're building physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, political infrastructure. You know, whether it's composting or water infrastructure or energy infrastructure, we're building that. If it's social infrastructure, building community, being actually able to overcome the alienation of white supremacy, racism, capitalism, we're building that. When it comes to a framework like the Latino Climate Justice Framework and actually being able to get people to think politically about the issues that structure their daily lives, that's political infrastructure. We have the knowledge and the solutions across the country in terms of this infrastructure. Now it's just time to build it. So I think that's easy to say, oh, we have the infrastructure, let's just build it. But it's there. It's not anything we don't have.
I think it's two parts for me. The fact that we're talking about the ecosystem and the environment and growing soil and stewarding the land properly and taking care of Mother Earth is huge, because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that wasn't something the collective group was really talking about. We were following the lead of the farmers, and we're changing that narrative. And then secondly, the fact that we're all in the same room with the same cause and moving in the same direction together, talking about growing compost and things like that, growing soil. There's so many groups right now that are doing urban farming and trying to grow healthy food for themselves and things of that nature. So for me, it's about the environment, the ecosystem, our health, our well-being, because I think when we're strong mentally, we have the energy to fight this monster that's been working against us for so long. So.
Okay, well, now we have about 10 minutes for any Q&A, and then we'll close this out. Are there any questions? Does anyone want to hear?
Woo! Man, that was exciting. I see GreenLatinos as a group of leaders right? Each advocating in your own community. And I see you all as leaders as well, so thank you for sharing your expertise, your experiences, and the solutions that you've brought to the table. I work with young adults, 18 to 26, and I strongly believe in mentorship. Passing down that experience, that leadership that you all possess, passing that down to the next generation. So my question is, what are you doing to mentor? If you're not, let's start now, right? That's my question, thank you.
So I think it was around mentorship. Was that your question? I don't know. Whoever wants to.
Switch up the order again. Well, in terms of UPROSE, we're an intergenerational and women of color-led organization. So young people, they have solutions, they have ideas. They're not something to be like siloed and to be separate. They're actually central to leadership and actually being able to make decisions. So, some of the stuff that we do around arts and culture, it's meant to engage young people at an early age to some of the things that we're talking about in terms of the solutions, in terms of the ideas like brought out in this framework, in a way that is accessible and relevant to them, so that over time they build up as leaders, and young people are our future. So it really is important to work with them and integrate them into the challenges that they will face in an accessible way.
Any other questions?
Do you mind if I answer that question really quickly? Sorry, just because I love that question so much. It really speaks to my heart, and I believe it's important to raise this just because I started doing this work over 10 years ago. But, not to age myself. But my goal in doing this work and making sure that I am building political power for working families and immigrants and people of color in this country. But I came into a movement where the people doing that work did not look like me. And I sound like this, and I look like this. And immediately after I started just doing the work, it has become central and to that work, what I call building the bench. We are not doing anything if today I happen to be the political director of an environmental organization and I do not include that mentorship portion. I think I'm very proud because before coming here, I helped build this, the infrastructure, electoral infrastructure for an immigrant rights organization, and mentored and trained and all the staff that today have continued the work and even brought the work to yet another state, right? Where now they can have even more influence. So I think that, to your point, in any role that we have, building the bench, making sure that you're not the only one holding knowledge or the only one doing the work, and leaving wherever you are better than where you encountered with knowledge, with resources, I think is important.
And just to add to that, building the bench, I love that term. I love that term. In Allensworth, we have a project-based learning program where we work with middle schoolers through high school. And exactly what we're doing in the community, we're training them on the environment, the environmental issues, and how to work around. We took them to an agrivoltaics farm this summer, and they had an opportunity to see what it was and see how it operates. They had the opportunity to grow plants in the 110-degree sun, and then have solar covering a plant, and then see the difference, how one plant thrived while the other one was burned by the sun. They've had the opportunity to go visit NASA, JPL, and learn different things. So a lot of the things that we're doing in the community, we're sharing with our youth, so they can aspire to do different things that they would have never had any knowledge about. So, yeah, to answer that question. Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Francisco. Comment and a question. So first, I really appreciate Sebastian giving a plug for community solar. Having worked in the residential and commercial solar space, I'm very well aware that putting a solar array on a rooftop on itself is not an environmentally just solution. You know, if we're looking at solar, we have to be thinking, how are we bringing down the barriers to entry? How are we ensuring that the homeowner or the renter is instantly saddled with a loan for thousands of dollars, and that the solar array isn't a stranded asset long term? My question is, this week we're focused a lot on political actors at state, federal level, but also we should point out the institutional challenges to getting environmentally just solutions implemented. I'm thinking utility companies, I'm thinking public service commissions. This is probably primarily for Sebastian, but anyone can answer. Can you point out maybe a success story where you're able to get an institutional roadblock, get past an institutional roadblock to implement an EJ solution? Anything, it can be energy, it can be food access. I appreciate your experience on a success. Thank you.
I mean, something that's an ongoing success, not to keep it on solar, but to keep it on solar, is that the community solar array that we're building is actually on public land. It's on a publicly owned building. It won't have lease payment to the landlord, which is good for the project economics. And what's new with this project is no one pays upfront a cost to actually become a subscriber. The money that actually is saved from the community solar array goes directly to their bill. And so in that sense, it has been easier to navigate with the utility company to not have that benefit be small or inconvenient to access. Being able to get funding from our state government to actually do the pre-development work for that. So it's an ongoing success, but needless to say, in other places it might not be as easy. Even other places in the city and the state, it is difficult.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for all of your incredible work. I've really enjoyed learning about all of your communities. I'm from Los Angeles, so I want to go to the garden and participate. Yeah, my question is sort of as I was thinking, and because I'm from California, I know we have massive urban populations of Latinos, and then, because California is a big state, we also have rural folks as well, and the issues are very different. Even looking at energy, clean energy development, different solutions are needed if you're a smaller community versus if you live in an apartment building, multifamily, or composting looks different, rural, urban. I don't know if you guys can speak to, or how can we make sure as a Latino community we are supporting rural and urban solutions and sort of working together to overcome the barriers that we need, because I think a lot of the times we lose perspective of what being an urban that setting looks like, or what folks in rural communities are dealing with. So I don't know if that strikes anything for anyone.
Yeah, I'd like to take a stab at that. Part of our beginning farmer training program is bridging the gap between urban and rural. Because like you said, they are two different types of farming, but they work hand in hand. We work with Drop Swap LA, we work with Compton Community Gardens, and we're just working to bridge the gap, as far as growing soil. The same soil you grow in a rural place is the same soil that you'll use in the urban place. So our training program is around how to mix those two and how to work together. We have portions of the training program where we have people from urban areas come up to the rural space and grow food, and then vice versa to get that experience. So yeah, that's just part of what we're trying to do, is actually bridge that gap, because like you said, there is a divide. Growing on concrete versus growing in the soil, growing out of pots versus growing in the soil. So there's ways to do it, and our training program talks a lot about that.
All right, well, give this amazing panel a round of applause. This will conclude our week, our advocacy week, and take a deep breath. Everyone got through it, and yeah.